All right, guys, welcome. This is a key for the pedigree worksheet and then the human genetics survey, just to show you how to do it. If you're watching this and you did it and you submitted it, if you go back and make corrections and then resubmit over the top of what you had already done with your corrections into Schoology, I will give you an additional 2 points on the assignment. Okay, just to let you guys know. But let's start with the pedigree studies. Make sure the pen is on. Pen is on. Okay, here we go. All right, so a lot of this is just looking at using attached earlobe and free earlobe as kind of your initial trait. It's important to note that free earlobes is dominant. Okay, so capital F. And then that attached earlobes is recessive. What that means is if you just have one copy of the dominant allele, so capital F, that means you're showing the trait. So you're showing that you have free earlobes. Okay. Okay, so the first part just kind of looks at what a pedigree is. It states that, your squares represent males, your circles are females. If it's shaded in, you have the trait. If it's unshaded, you don't have the trait. And then it gives the order. The birth order goes on from left to right. So 1 being the oldest, 2 middle child, 3 youngest. Okay. Oldest child is always on the left. Okay. So what is the sex of the oldest child? Well, the oldest child's a circle, so it's female. What is the sex of the youngest child? Well, the youngest child is a square. So that is male. And then you have to identify the mother. Now, the identification is you go generation first and then the number. So the mom is right here. So it's generation 1-2. Okay, because her number, I got the 2 from right here. Okay. All right. Here we go. So the next page, it says which person is the son-in-law. So the son-in-law is the one that's married in. So it's that guy right there. So that's generation 2-1. Okay, to whom is he married? Well, this person right there. So that's generation 2-2. What is the sex of their child? The child is right there. A circle is female. Okay, so far so good. This part says the value of a pedigree is that it can predict the genotype of each person for a certain trait. So the shaded symbols are pure recessive, so that means 2 little letters. Okay, good to know. All unshaded symbols have at least one dominant gene, so 1 capital F. So this is important to note that this person could be capital F, or they could be capital F, lower F. In both cases, they will have free earlobes. Okay, so they want us to assign what we have here. So we can easily do the shaded in ones because those are both lower cases. And sorry, I'm going to try and make those really lowercase and appear really lowercase here. So lowercase, 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 lowercase. Okay, now, if they're unshaded, they have at least 1 capital, right? So we can say that's for certain. But we can even go a little bit further, okay? We can think Punnett squares here. So look at the cross between mom and dad. So we have mom we'll put up top. And then dad down here. Now what's really telling is one of their offspring has the trait, has a lowercase f. So that really is able to tell us what this second allele would be. Now if we thought that this second allele is also a capital, if you look at the Punnett square, the only thing that can be produced if it's capital for the mom, rather not the dad, for the mom. Sorry, I think I flip-flopped my male and female here. But for this circle is if you had capital, they'd only be able to produce a mix of alleles, and you would not be able to produce this offspring right here. So what that means is that this second allele has to be a lowercase, okay? Because then what that allows is for these to be a lowercase too. So the only two possible genotypes from this cross is you're either going to be a heterozygote or you're going to be lowercase, lowercase. So that means that we can figure out that those ones are going to be heterozygotes as well. So that means that mom up here had to be a heterozygote. Okay, now can we tell with certainty what the son-in-law is right here? No, we can't. But we can definitely tell that the daughter, this one right here, has to be a heterozygote. Now, how do I know that? Well, it's not showing the trait, so we know that one capital's in there. But then the mom right here, she can only pass a lowercase f to her offspring. So that means that this individual, this female, generation 3, has to be a heterozygote. Okay. But we can't tell for certain if the male is double homozygous, so homozygous dominant, or if they're a heterozygote. We don't know that for certain. We'd have to see more offspring and see if they're able to produce one that is shaded in. Okay. All right, so down here then they want you to fill in the pedigrees, or sorry, the genotypes for all persons with these following pedigrees. Okay, so do the easy ones first. If they're shaded in, it has to be homozygous recessive, so little f, little f. Little f, little f. Okay. All right, now from this, we kind of have the same scenario. We have, if they're unshaded, you have dominant ones for sure. Okay. Now, the trick is, well, can we tell what this next blank is, what the second allele is? And in this case, we can. It has to be a lowercase because they produced an offspring that was homozygous recessive, lowercase f, lowercase f. So that means the only two options, just like last time, are either they have the trait, like this individual, or they're a heterozygote, like the other two siblings. Okay? All right. So then if you look over here, this tells you too that both of these two are also going to be heterozygotes. Only possible option. They can't be capital F because they're only going to get the capital F from one parent. The other parent can only send lowercase f's. Okay, so that means they're definitely heterozygotes. All right, so over here, this is an interesting case. You have two parents that aren't showing the trait, but yet they have an offspring that is showing the trait. So what that means is they have to be, they have to be heterozygotes themselves. Okay. So if you have a heterozygote cross with a heterozygote, you get this for your Punnett square: capital F, capital F, capital F, little f, capital F, little f, little f, little f. So this is the result of right there. These other two, you have two options. They're definitely containing a capital F, but you don't know if they're homozygous dominant, like this one, or if they're a heterozygote, like these two. So since we don't know for certain, we just leave it blank. And I usually write a blank as just kind of like a line with nothing in it. Okay, now over here, this doesn't really show us anything. We know that they all don't show the trait, so we kind of do that. But since they did not produce an offspring that's shaded in, we can't specifically tell if they're both capital or if these guys are capital and lowercase, capital, lowercase, if they're heterozygotes. We don't know. There's really not enough information for any of that. So all of these guys, the second allele is uncertain. Okay. All right, this one says fill in the genotypes and use the pedigree below to answer these questions. So we can quickly fill this in. So we know that lowercase for your shaded in guys. And then this has to be a capital. Now we don't know, they didn't produce any offspring that have the trait, so we have to leave that as blank. Same there. Okay, well we know for certain that this one has to be a carrier because one allele comes from mom and one comes from dad, and dad definitely sent the capital F. That means mom obviously has only the option to send a lowercase f. So we have that. All right, now over here, again, their offspring for this cross, you have a capital F, capital F, capital F. We don't know if this person's a heterozygote or if this person's a heterozygote or if this person's a heterozygote. So that means that we aren't really able to figure those out. So those are all blank. Okay, but over here, this is telling this individual has to be a heterozygote. Yeah. So that's all you can really effectively fill out. You don't know all of them, but you know some of them, and that's all you can go with. In some cases, you don't have to fill everything out if you don't know them. Okay? All right, now answering the questions, how many generations are shown? 1, 2, 3, 4. How many persons have free earlobes? So remember that free earlobes means that they have capital F, okay? So if you count all those people, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. How many people have attached? That's the shaded, so you just have 2. Identify by generation and number those persons with attached earlobes. So it's generation 1 dash 2 and generation 3 dash 4. Give the genotype for all persons having attached. Well, it's lowercase f, so double lowercase. Homozygous recessive, that would be called technically. How many children did the original generation have? Well, they only had one, so just one child. Okay, so that is the last page for that. Now I just wanted to go into the human genetics survey and just kind of walk through this. So same rules apply. If you go in and you make your corrections to this because you realize you did something wrong, resubmit, I'll give you more points. These you can look up on your own. I would recommend just using, obviously since we don't have a book, you could use the book, but you could also use the Google and find a definition that works for you. But for the first thing, before starting the assignment, do you think the dominant phenotypes would be more often seen in a population or recessive? Typically, most people think that dominant phenotypes are more seen just because they think dominant, as long as they have one copy of that capital letter, it's going to be visibly seen from the genotype standpoint. So the phenotype would then be expressed. That's what most students say. Okay, so what you had to do for this is you had to go into each of these traits and assess yourself. Okay, so for me, I do not have a bent pinky. I do have, yes, I have blue eyes. I do have yes to mid-digital hair. I can roll my tongue. I do have a widow's peak, actually. Attached earlobes is a no. Cleft chin, yes. Dimples, no. Bent thumb, yes. Freckles, no. So that is my look. Okay, now you then have to figure out your genotype. So I said no to bent pinky. So that means if having a bent pinky that bends towards the ring finger is dominant rather than having a straight pinky. Now I have a straight pinky, which means I show the recessive trait. So I have lowercase p, lowercase p. Blue eyes. Trait for blue eyes is homozygous recessive. Okay, so that means it's little b, little b. Mid-digital hair. Hair on the middle segment of your fingers is dominant to not have any. Okay, so I have the dominant trait. So that means I'm capital M. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be capital M or capital M lowercase? I don't know. We'd have to do a genetic test for that. So I'm just leaving the second one as blank. Tongue rolling is a yes. So dominant allele for tongue rolls can roll their tongue into a tube shape. So that means I am capital R, but same deal. I don't know what my second allele would be. Widow's peak, I have a yes for widow's peak. Having a widow's peak is dominant. Okay, so that means I have the capital W. I don't have the second allele known. My earlobes are attached. So the allele for having attached earlobes is recessive. Oh, I have the recessive allele there. So I have little a cleft chin. So I do have a dent in my chin, and that's dominant to no dent. So that means I have capital C, but I don't know what the second allele is. No dimples for me. People without dimples are homozygous recessive. So that means I have lowercase d. Bent thumb. I do have a bent thumb. It's dominant to having the straight thumb. So that means I have capital T, but I don't know the second allele. And then freckles is a no. Having freckles is dominant to not having freckles. So I don't have freckles, so I have the recessive. Okay. So that's what mine looks like. So one says, were you correct in your answer to the top of the page? I mean, I have a lot of recessive alleles, and it's really tough to answer question one without class data, but what we would have found is that most of the class has the recessive traits in this case. So it's kind of eye-opening in a way for students to see, oh, recessive traits are often expressed almost as much, if not more, than dominant traits. And then 2 says, is it possible to determine the genotype of a person just by looking at them? In some cases, yes. Like if they have the recessive trait, like I don't have dimples, so that means that I have the homozygous recessive gene for not having dimples. So you could assess and be able to identify my genotype. But like I can roll my tongue. Could you figure out the genotype for that? No, because it's dominant. You'd have to look at like my parents and see if my parents had tongue rolling and then kind of do a Punnett square out to see if that's possible. Okay, to see if I'm homozygous dominant or if I'm heterozygous in that case. So this is like kind of a mix. It's like yes, but it depends if you're looking at a recessive trait or if you're showing the dominant trait for that allele, for that gene. So it's kind of a mishmash for that one. If this confused you at all, please email me and let me know. Again, those of you that are watching, if you go back and make your corrections and resubmit, make sure your corrections are in a different color. You'll get more points. Okay? All right. That is it for me.